Spiritual teaching, what it is and what it does.
Through the study of spiritual teachings, it is offered to become a responsible, true human being and to promote the evolution of consciousness, the development of character, personality, and general valuable behavior.
The teaching of the Spirit is the teaching of the prophets, which has been handed down from time immemorial through the true prophets of the Nocodemian lineage as the teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life. It is a teaching for the benefit of all humanity, for women, men, children and adolescents, and it deals with all the small and minor, but also with all the major and main problems of humanity's existence. The teaching teaches the path of progress and the effective development of the mental block, that is to say, the consciousness, the world of thoughts and feelings, and the psyche as well as humane and creational natural behavior and the shaping and leading of life. It teaches the correct way of dealing with oneself as well as with fellow human beings, the entire environment, and with fauna and flora. There is only one prerequisite for the teaching and for belonging to it: the desire and the conscious will as well as the conscious action to stop doing wrong and evil in every respect and to become a true human being in effective humanity. To do this, it is recommended to be open-minded and to gain a willingness to put aside inferior and inhumane behavior, wrongdoing and evil, and also to put this into practice. The teaching of the prophets, the teaching of the Spirit, knows no dogmas, that is to say doctrines, no belief in God and cult of God, etc., as is the case with religions and sects, but offers only absolutely neutral doctrines that may and can be followed in daily life without any compulsion or force. The teachings can be followed freely and at one's own discretion and will or not. But if they are followed, the most important thing is that they actually work. And indeed, it is a given that they are not in any wise religiously or sectarianly dependent, or also only minimally influenced in any form. There are no obligations whatsoever associated with learning the spiritual teachings, for every human being learning them is independent in terms of learning, studying, and in terms of the realization and application of what has been learnt. Consequently, no promises need also be made to anyone in terms of learning and applying what has been learnt. The only commitment that must be made to learn the teaching is to pay a modest admission fee CHF 30 and the small amount of CHF 45, plus postage for the 4 monthly teaching letters, 4 teaching letters, totaling approx. 50 to 55 A4 pages. The teaching was retrieved from the memory banks, formulated and written down by Billy Edward Albert Meier, called Billy Edward Albert Meier, and the spiritual teaching, that is to say, the traditional true teaching of the prophets, is distributed by the association FIGU-Freie Interessengemeinschaft für Grenz- und Geisteswissenschaften und Ufologiestudien, which is spread worldwide and has no connections to judicial authorities, military, secret services, religions, sects, politics, or to terrorist or anti-state, anti-social, or anti-human groups. And the students of spiritual science are also not under the supervision of the FIGU, but are free and self-determined in every respect. All human beings of all races, parental permission is required up to the age of 14, otherwise age is irrelevant, regardless of skin color, language, profession, ideology, creed, sexual identity or political affiliation, can become students of spiritual teaching. But according to the rules of the FIGU, no propaganda of any political, secular, religious, military or sectarian faith is carried out in the FIGU Association. And what else is important? FIGU is not interested in how much or how little you own, but is only interested in how you can tackle the problems of your life, your way of life, your lifestyle, your true humanity, and the conscious development of your consciousness, and how you can promote everything for the best, which FIGU can help you to do with the actual spiritual teachings, and with other spiritual teachings and textbooks. Everyone who learns and studies the teachings is an important person for the FIGU and is always welcome, because everyone who endeavors to learn the teachings helps themselves to achieve true humanity, just as everyone also helps to show fellow human beings the same way. This is the only way to ensure that the valuable spiritual teaching and all its good is passed on and preserved, so that the whole of true human being and all its values can gradually spread and reach more and more human beings. This is the only way to ensure that the longing of Earth's human beings for true love, freedom, peace, and harmony is fulfilled. And only in this way can it be guaranteed that all evil, coercive, violent, false, insidious and power-hungry behavior, torture, wars, destruction, and all senseless degeneracy of every kind will dissolve over time in the minds and desires of human beings and disappear from world history. The truth is that many, before they consciously and willingly learnt the spiritual teachings, were unable to master their own lives, or only very poorly. They were unable to live like other human beings, which meant that they were also unable to enjoy their existence. They lived in monotony and without a path or goal because they believed that what their life was all it could offer them. They prioritized pleasure and mammon, as well as religious or sectarian beliefs, over the good of their own personality, their family, their wives, husbands and offspring, their friends, acquaintances, and fellow human beings in general. They led their unhappy lives out of a false understanding of life, at all costs. They caused great harm to their partners, loved ones, friends, relatives, acquaintances, and many foreign human beings, but most of all, they harmed themselves. They lived in an inability to effectively take personal responsibility for their own lives and those of their family and fellow human beings in general. Ultimately, they constantly created new problems through their own wrong behavior and their passivity with regard to their development of consciousness, but also through their generally wrong way of life and lifestyle. They were often unable to cope with them, so they multiplied, and one problem triggered a cascade of further problems. Quite simply, they were incapable of facing life and reality because they were not made aware of this through their upbringing and were not taught about it. So from an early age, they lacked the necessary knowledge, experience, and their experience, and never learnt to deal with life, reality, and its truth in the course of their lives. However, those who turned to the spiritual teaching became aware that their delusional and completely false way of life was driving them more and more into the offside of life and into an addiction to false behavior. However, this addiction to wrong behavior, wrong lifestyle, and wrong way of living is a vicious and insidious enemy of life, as it causes human beings to lose control and might over themselves and their behavior, with nothing they can do about it. Some attempted suicide, others ended up in the gutter, in alcohol, in drugs, or they partially or completely destroyed their families, while others ended up in prison. Many senselessly sought help from medical resources, religions, and cults, or ended up in dubious organizations or psychiatric institutions. The truth is, however, that none of these paths proved to be sufficient or correct, because the wrong behavior and lifestyle could not be changed and broke through again and again, becoming more and more blatant over time. And this continued until they reached the brink of despair and, as a final step, tried to find a lifeline in learning and studying the true spiritual teachings. In this way, they found help for self-help, as it is comprehensively taught by the spiritual teachings, in a way that every human being can understand. After they had found the spiritual teaching, they realized that they were leading a false life and were not living in true humanity, but that in some wise they had a false idea of life and all its values, as well as of reality and its truth. They were suffering from an unwisdom of life, from false ideas of life and values of life, as well as from ignorance and unwisdom, for which there is no cure except that of consciously and willingly learning and accepting and implementing everything related to life, as everything is predetermined by the creational natural laws and commandments, and as the whole is offered and taught through the spiritual teaching. If you, human beings of Earth, are willing to learn through the spiritual teachings and follow the true path of your life by turning to the creational natural laws and commandments, learning, understanding, and also following them, then you will be able to take steps to master your life. The spiritual teaching is very comprehensive and includes all factors of existence in every respect, and thus also of how to shape your life, how to lead your life, and how you as a human being can become a true human being, and as such live and accomplish good things. For you, human being of the earth, this all seems to be a huge task, which it truly is, and which you cannot master all at once and in a short time, because all the wrong things you have accumulated in your life and in your attitude, opinion, thoughts, and feelings, you have also not learnt in one day or otherwise in a short time. So you will also need a long time to reshape everything, because the new learning you have to strive for should be valuable and sustainable. You will therefore need a great deal of patience, because your transformation into a true human being and the necessary insights, experiences, and their realization will not happen overnight. You must also recognize and understand that there is much more standing in your way of this change than you can imagine. The worst is the indifferent and intolerant attitude towards the creational natural principles that are to be followed as all-encompassing laws and commandments, whereby motivation, open-mindedness, and willingness, as well as the will to follow them, are of the utmost importance, but also honesty towards yourself. And only when these values are present in you do you have the opportunity to lead yourself along the correct path. Human beings of Earth, you believe that your way of dealing with life, the way you live and lead your life, your development of consciousness, character and personality, and your general and specific behavior is completely correct, realistic, and irreproachable. But this is by no means the case, because all the atrocities and wars, terrorism, envy, criminality, slander and crime, jealousy, hatred, vengefulness, torture, unkindness and indifference, the desire for revenge, vice, greed, and all coercion and violence prove the opposite. That is why it is necessary that you, human being of the earth, must turn towards the good and the best, and thus towards obeying the creational natural laws and commandments. Only in this way can you get away from all kinds of evil and become a true human being. However, this means that you must also help your neighbors, which is of therapeutic value, because only by helping each other in a good and wise way can comprehensive success and a valuable interpersonal relationship come into being and true humanity emerge. Learning, understanding and obeying the creational natural laws and commandments, and helping each other from human being to human being is the true practical way to progress and success in terms of true humanity. And there can be no better way than when human beings understand each other, solve problems together, learn together, help each other, and thus also shape society in a good way. The fact is that the sooner you human beings on Earth face your own problems and those of society in your daily lives in order to overcome them, the sooner you will become responsible, productive, and recognized by your fellow human beings as true human beings. In doing so, however, you will first and foremost find yourselves, your own abilities, possibilities, and values, and this will enable you to master your own lives, just as you will also become valuable members of society who are able to provide something valuable in every conceivable respect. And if you have become true human beings in effective humanity, then the only way to avoid falling back into the old layer of human unworthiness is to no longer give the old and overcome a chance to relapse, but to always endeavor to do what is creatively and naturally best, good and correct. It must always be borne in mind that often even a single small lapse in whatever wise leads to a relapse and a new dependence on the old behavior. The only way to avoid a new active addiction and falling back into the old behavior is to consciously live only with and according to everything new, and to completely dissolve the old and overcome. Unfortunately, however, there are always many who work towards a change to a new and valuable life, and also achieve good successes, but they do not have enough energy and strength to stick with these successes and keep adding to them. It is these people who then relapse, possibly falling into an addiction to alcohol, drugs, and a crazy religious and sectarian delusion, because they are too careless with everything they have learnt and do not realize that they must constantly work to maintain, enjoy, and also expand the success they have achieved. The clear truth is that everything learnt from the spiritual teaching must be preserved as a valuable good and constantly followed in life, whereby the individual human being must learn and follow all the creational natural laws and commandments given by the spiritual teaching in full freedom. Everything in life can only be good and constant, as well as progressive and developing, if the bonds for fulfillment exist between the creational natural laws and commandments and the human beings, holding them together. And in order to build this bond between the human beings of Earth and the creational natural laws and commandments, the spiritual teaching offers all the necessary teaching facts and guidelines, which, however, must ultimately spring from your own realization through learning. And what the spiritual teaching teaches is very comprehensive and also includes the following 42 as well as many other important things.
Human beings of the earth.
You must admit to yourself and understand that you are powerless in relation to yourself to really master your life in a creational natural framework without better knowledge and ability. 2. You must be knowing, free from any belief of any kind. 3. You must realize that there is no God who supposedly guides and directs you and determines your destiny, but only creation universal consciousness.
Explanation. Creation, what it is.
The creation is a tremendous, neutral, energetic, and evolutive entity, being creation life, which is not a being as such, but an entity as a pure natural energy state, a naturally evolutive spirit, energetic, effective energy. The entity creation is a purely spiritual energetic state of being, state of creation life, a radiant spiritual light energy, and therefore not a being in the sense of a human being, another creature, or another personified being, therefore also not a deity in superhuman form. A being is an independently existing life form with its own individuality and personality in impulsive, instinctive or conscious form of consciousness, with specific evolutionary possibilities orientated towards everything, and with its own physical, psychic, conscious, partially conscious, unconscious, impulsive or instinctive forms of development. Human beings, animals and plants. An entity is not a being as such, but an immaterial or material form of existence without an independently determining possibility of evolution, although this can be predetermined to a certain extent. For example, as in the case of creation universal consciousness, certain energies, stones, water and gases, etc., as a natural form of spirit energy, creation. Universal consciousness is a purely causal, evolution-based and existing form of spirit energy, from which the likewise causal, evolution-based creational natural laws and commandments are given. These in turn are neutral positive balanced in their existence, meaning that they contain 100% positive and 100% negative in equal measure, which is what makes evolution possible in the first place. This equal negative and positive means that creation's universal consciousness, and therefore also its natural laws and commandments, are absolutely neutrally and positively balanced, meaning that neither the negative nor the positive outweighs the positive in any wise. Overall, therefore, everything in creation universal consciousness is absolutely balanced, as a result of which neither good nor evil exists in it, but only neutral balance. Consequently, everything also exists in this way, which means that every life form exists, that is to say, is born in the same way, so that good or evil only develops in it through education, as is also the case with human beings, who are born in a neutral balanced wise and only develop into what they will then be through education. Creation universal consciousness is therefore neutral positive balanced in every form, because the fact that it contains 100% positive and 100% negative results in an absolute balance of the two energies, which leads to the effect of balance. If two energies and their forces are equally strong in every respect, then one or the other cannot predominate, but can only lead to a balance. The whole corresponds to an energetic knowledge and energetic wisdom, as these are also given to creation in itself. The spirit energy form, creation. Universal consciousness continues to accumulate its knowledge and wisdom in a spirit energetic wise way, namely in the form of absorbing the progressive evolutionary processes and results of the entire nature, the entire universe content and human beings as well as all other life forms as energetic knowledge and energetic wisdom. Creation thus grows cumulatively as a spirit energy form until it has reached its highest possible energy form. Once this state is reached, it goes into slumber, that is to say, the universe falls into contraction, after which, after a period of 7x 311 trillion and 40 billion years, a new universe, that is to say, a new creation. Universal consciousness is formed as a primordial creation, in which there is no longer any gross materiality, but only pure spiritual evolutionary energy. Creation. Universal consciousness is therefore a very high form of spirit energy, which can be described as an individual spirit energy entity, but which is not a being as such, but only a very highly developed causal and evolutionary form of spirit energy, which as such continues to accumulate through the evolutionary achievements of all that has emerged through its causal and evolutionary laws. Creation universal consciousness is a natural production of its own evolution, just as human beings and all other living beings, as well as the entire universe and everything that exists in it, corresponds to the causal evolutionary forms given by the creational natural laws. In its natural evolutionary energy, it is formed so high above all material things and thus also exists so immeasurably high above human beings on a purely spiritual energetic level that it would be impossible for it to establish any kind of communicative connection with a human being. Creation as a pure form of energy without personality and subordinate to causality and evolution is alone in its existence, and it is neither a duality nor a trinity, but an independent, natural, and evolutionary single energetic form of infinite spiritual energetic greatness and might. You have to explore yourself and make a moral inventory of yourself without fear, without self-conceit, and without wanting to be better than you really are. 5. You must allow yourself not to place a God, and not his alleged responsibility and will above you, and not to believe in such an imaginary illusory figure. But you must be responsible for yourself, and also be responsible for yourself in every respect. 6. You must understand yourself, and trust yourself, and your abilities and possibilities. So you must take your life into your own hands, and not place your trust in an imaginary deity who is unworthy of you and delusional. 7. You must admit your own mistakes to yourself in exactly the same way as you also have to admit them to your fellow human beings who are involved in them. 8. You must be unreservedly prepared to eliminate your character defects, wrong behavior, and harmful shortcomings through your own efforts. 9. If you have caused any harm to other human beings, then be prepared to talk to them peacefully and reasonably about it, and make good the harm done in a likewise wise way, no matter what kind of harm it is, and no matter what effort it also costs you. 10. If you have hurt other human beings through words, etc., be prepared to make amends through connecting conversations, seeking forgiveness, and building good interpersonal relationships, always taking care not to hurt others again. 11. You must constantly take stock of your personality and, when you make mistakes, admit them to yourself immediately so that you can rectify them. 12. You must seek, establish and deepen the connection to yourself through purposeful meditation, whereby you must also recognize your own will in order to carry it out, because you alone are the power that determines you, your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, your psyche and your actions, as well as the realization of your abilities, possibilities and desires, etc. 13. You must consciously and willingly endeavor to awaken within yourself and experience the inner awakening, whereby you must then align your daily life accordingly and follow the principles of real life, as well as the creational natural laws and commandments. 14. Your own well-being must come first. But you can only achieve this if you live in unity with yourself, which will also enable you to work for the well-being of your neighbors and fellow human beings in general. 15. There is only one supreme authority for the meaning and purpose of the fulfillment of your life and all your life's endeavors, you yourself. Consequently, the bearing and exercising of responsibility in every conceivable respect is also your own responsibility. 16. Any responsibility you have to bear and exercise must be compatible with your own conscience, as you are your own confidant, and you rule over yourself without others being able to rule over you. 17. The only prerequisite for you to achieve this is your desire to become a true human being in effective humanity, to give up your previous unfulfilled life and to develop into a higher form in your entire mental block, that is to say, in your consciousness, in your world of thoughts and feelings, and in your psyche, which will also move your character and personality into better and more valuable directions. 18. The main task of your efforts in every wise must be that you find yourself, that you recognize yourself, and that you transform yourself into a better and good human being, that you gain a comprehensive respect for yourself and your fellow human beings. 19. In every relationship, you must always support yourself, because only you alone can change yourself into a better, good, and fully viable human being. No other human being can do that for you. No human being can be transformed and changed in their nature, character, personality, behavior, etc. by another person, because everyone can only do this for themselves. 20. Under no circumstances should you allow yourself to be distracted from your main task, namely to learn and work on yourself in order to become a true and viable human being by the money, titles, possessions, goods, prestige or divine salvation, etc. offered to you. 21. You must endeavor in every respect to transform yourself into a true human being, for only in this way will you be able to preserve yourself and reject everything unreal, which is false and void, such as every religious belief, which leads to error, confusion, dependence, independence, and conscious enslavement. 22. You must reject everything that is unreal, believable, illogical, and contrary to understanding and reason, and turn solely to reality and its truth, which is contained and can only be found in the creational natural laws and commandments. 23. You must always remain full of energy and strength, for this demands not only the correct performance of the transformation into a true human being. 24. You yourself must manage your own life with all its ups and downs in the correct way and on your own responsibility, because no one else can do it for you. 25. You, human being of earth, must always be your own lord and master, and never blame others for things for which you yourself are responsible. 26. You should never allow yourself to be drawn into public disputes, but should only express your own opinion, and also only where it is harmless to do so. 27. Your relationship with fellow human beings and with the public must be based on your attraction, on the values of your knowledge, your wisdom, your love and peacefulness, your radiance of harmony, and your inner and outer freedom. 28. Always maintain anonymity and secrecy when any things, words, or secrets are entrusted to you. Anything entrusted to you must remain with you alone as knowledge and must not be passed on. Trust is the most valuable foundation between human beings, because trust is the principle on which correct, sincere, and valuable interpersonal relationships can exist. 29. If you want to fulfill the main task of making yourself a true and viable human being who can also withstand all the storms of life, then you must create a structure of your own that develops, coordinates, implements, and maintains the values of your interests as a whole. 30. In any case, you must always realize that you are solely responsible for everything and anything you do, and must bear the ultimate responsibility for it, because neither God nor any other human being apart from yourself can be your own authority, and therefore also cannot bring it to bear. 31. It is always within your own authority to do the things necessary to shape and lead your life and to become a true human being who cultivates his existence in true humanity, and also shows the necessary attentiveness, help and honor to fellow human beings, fauna and flora. 32. Your own correct and creatively naturally just guidance and shaping of your life, as well as the righteous shaping of your being. Your honesty, decency and respect, your character, your personality and behavior as well as your opinion, your knowledge, love and wisdom, your inner and outer peace, harmony and your inner and outer freedom must always be a highly valued good for you in every respect. 33. The effectively correct guidance of your own personality and the creatively and naturally just way of molding your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings and your psyche must also always be a high value to you, so that you must develop for yourself an authoritative quality of leadership through which you are able to guide yourself in a righteous manner. 34. For every task that you assign to yourself, you are the only responsible party who can clearly define everything, make an appropriate decision, and take responsibility for it. 35. In any case, your conscience is always your only means by which you are able to guide your decisions for and about everything and anything in relation to your thoughts, feelings, and actions, and in order to let your conscience rule, you need your mind and your reason. By these two factors, you make the answer of your conscience appear worthy or unworthy. Consequently, you act consciously and correctly with understanding, reason, and conscience, or consciously and willfully wrongly and contrary to them. Says in any case, with regard to the activity of your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, your mental state and your actions, it is the case that you decide everything yourself and consequently also bear full responsibility for all your decision-making processes and for your actions. 37. Your integrity and effectiveness in every wise and in every case always depends on the communication with yourself. 38. In every case and in every respect, you yourself are responsible for everything in your self-created structure with regard to the organization and conduct of your life, and for the progress and development of your consciousness into a higher form, and therefore also for all your viewpoints, opinions, actions, and implementation and decision-making processes. 39. You need your own courage to make amends for your wrong way of life and behavior, etc., as well as for the personal damage you have suffered through yourself, because you can only turn to yourself without fear of reprisals. 40. You must use all your energies and powers of your mental block to accomplish your main task in life, namely to become a responsible true human being in effective humanity, and then to manage what you have acquired and gained. 41. You yourself must have might over yourself, your behavior, your opinions, and your own attitude to life, as well as over your consciousness, your thoughts and feelings, and over your psyche, your actions, your freedom, your peace, your true love and harmony, so that others do not rule over them and thus over you. Overall, you must be in harmony with the creational natural laws and commandments, with your character and your personality, as well as with your mind, your reason, your conscience, and your sense of responsibility. For only in this way will you be able to achieve conscious success and the goal of your endeavors.
Simyase Silver Star Center, 5th August 2010, 2319 HR's Billy.
The nature of the Studien- und Landesgruppen.
Introduction.
The FIGU study groups and FIGU-Landesgruppen are intended for all human beings who seek reality and its truth in all directions, and who endeavor to develop their own consciousness, thinking, feelings, and actions. In the foreground of the interests of the study and national groups is always the endeavor to support human beings on the path of their personal and individual development. However, this path may also be. Every human being is completely free, independent, and worthy of respect, which is why the FIGU study groups and FIGU national groups can only give them the space, that is to say, the motivation for their own realization, their own self-awareness, their own knowledge, and their own wisdom. The effective and valuable information in all areas of life that the members of the study and national groups deal with, which they study openly and try to realize to the best of their knowledge and ability in everyday life, serves this purpose.
Motivation.
The whole value of the FIGU information is unique in the world, because its source is the spiritual teaching of the Swiss Billy, Edward A. Meier, who is in contact with a highly developed extraterrestrial civilization from the Pleiadian Pleiaren star cluster. The Pleiadian stars are around 85 light-years further away than the Pleiadians as we know them, at a distance of around 500 light-years from Earth. However, the Pleiadian stars, whose inhabitants also call themselves Pleiadian according to their system, are located in a different dimension, that is to say, in a different space-time continuum of our universe, shifted by a fraction of a second. The Pleiadian, as well as the high spirit levels, Arahat, Atha, Sata, and Petale, and above all, Billy, Eduard Albert Meier. Billy, Eduard Albert Meier. One Nei, who in his entire life as a prophet of modern times has acquired a completely unprecedented knowledge, great wisdom and love that has absolutely no parallels on the whole earth, are involved in the mission of the spiritual teaching. The full value of the teachings and a great deal of necessary information are now recorded in writing on more than 20,000 pages in German, but the whole thing will only be fully appreciated in many centuries, in about 800 years. Only then, according to the Pleiadian statements, will the spiritual teachings of human beings on earth bear their first great fruits. However, the whole thing is already being presented, disseminated and unfolded by the Free Interest Group for Frontier and Spiritual Sciences and Ufology Studies. FIGU-So, Hinterschmidruti 1225, CH 8495 Schmidruti, Switzerland, whereby no missionary work is being carried out in any wise. The FIGU studies and FIGU-Landesgruppen all over the world are already dealing with all the knowledge and values of the spiritual teaching, originally called the teaching of the prophets, as well as the teaching of truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of life. And they do this by collating, studying, translating and presenting everything that needs to be learnt, thereby offering every human being or interested party the opportunity to freely and individually integrate themselves into this process in their own language. This is so that every willing human being who engages with it can gain great values and progressive insights for his or her life. In fact, the teaching as a whole also offers comprehensive insights into the real history of our Earth, as well as the origin of the universe, the effective meaning of life, Earth foreigners' civilizations, real meditation, interpersonal relationships, and love. However, it also includes many other aspects such as those of human society, culture, consciousness, the subconscious, the psyche, character and spirit, etc., etc. The scope of the topics to be studied and discussed is extraordinarily broad and encompasses all areas of human life, and the members of the FIGU-Landesgruppen regard all this as permanent, incessant, lifelong evolutionary endeavors in all directions. Only the free, individual and conscious development of the individual guarantees the fulfillment of the meaning of life and the creation of all human and interpersonal values, as well as the logic and ultimately also the achievement of global peace.
Equivalence in the approach.
We members of the FIGU, Study and Landesgruppen, are not and do not consider ourselves to be knowers, but in every respect only seekers and students, because we also have to learn to live, and so we learn to deal with our own thoughts and feelings, and to fulfill our work-related private and all other duties. So, we do not elevate ourselves one iota above our neighbors, but we try to enter into the best possible relationship with them, based on absolute equality, equivalence, respect and due restraint. We never consider the value of a human being in and of itself in connection with their social status, financial situation, abilities, knowledge or similar, because the value of every human being remains given and unchangeable once and for all by the very nature of their human being. We take every human being as he or she is, and we appreciate his or her personality, which we encourage in the good out of principle. We do this because we want every human being to be themselves, or to become themselves, and to develop in the correct form if they find the way to do so. He determines this path for himself, as well as his own thoughts and feelings, his opinions, plans, intentions and experiences.
Absence of faith, critical faculties, openness.
We members of the FIGU, study in FIGU-Landesgruppen, are not believers in the FIGU teachings or anything else, because we know that the only way to real insight, knowledge, wisdom and love is through our own critical thinking. And this is done to the last consequence, whereby everything is analyzed, compared, considered and thought through, with the human being coming to his or her own unique conclusions in every respect. However, critical thinking in no way means exaggerated unhealthy criticism, a know-it-all attitude, fanatical bias or prejudice, because such unvalues, together with a religious or other belief, inhibit the recognition of reality and its truth, as well as the attainment of all that is valuable. Free, open, unbiased and critical thinking is therefore necessary for human beings to be able to recognize and fathom the truth in one way or another in their own individual way, in order to then integrate the truth gained as an effective value into their everyday life and work. And it is precisely with this thought value that the members of the FIGU, Study and Landesgruppen work in relation to the materials, information, knowledge and insights of FIGU and the teachings of Billy Edward Albert Meier, as well as the extraterrestrials and the spirit planes. The whole thing has absolutely nothing to do with any belief, religion, ideology, sectarianism, or blind adherence to this or that school of thought, rigidity, dependence, bondage, subservience, fanaticism, lack of freedom, etc. All the negative characteristics, approaches and tendencies listed above nip the FIGU, Study and Landesgruppe in the bud, as the FIGU itself does worldwide, because its nature is extremely primitive, anti-purpose and anti-life, cultic and stagnative, and its unvalues enslave human beings in their consciousness so that they become weak creatures when they deal with them.
Theory and practice in dynamic interaction.
At this point, another very important aspect is worth mentioning. For the members of the FIGU, Study and Landesgroups, there is no single theory, only practice. We therefore see theory and practice as two sides of the same coin. Ultimately, our entire study is fundamentally the learning of the actual life, that is to say, the actual practice of life, and thus the practice of the lifelike process, the lifelike facts, the similar connections, and the causal law of nature. We therefore recognize as truth above all that which finds its resonance in actual reality, that which one is able to grasp, experience, and realize in one's own life through causal influences. Only in this way does the real knowledge and the resulting essence of wisdom arise, as well as the certainty that everything is in fact as it is written, thought, felt or said, and as it is taught through the spiritual teachings of Billy Edward Albert Meier. The main aim of the members of the FIGU-Landesgruppen is therefore to learn to live better, correctly, and according to the creational natural laws and commandments. In this way, we want not only ourselves, but also our fellow human beings in general, who are willing to turn to the teaching to better realize and shape their own everyday lives, their everyday thoughts, feelings and actions. And not simply in order to talk better and impress with their own supposed progressiveness, spiritualization, erudition, or intellectuality or the like. We from the FIGU-Studien- und Landesgruppen as well as all other members of all FIGU groupings, are not know-it-alls or know-it-alls who strive to shine and brag about their supposedly enormous knowledge. We simply try to fulfill our duties towards our own lives, our own consciousness, our own thoughts, feelings, actions and deeds in all modesty, but without any submissive humility of a cultic religious nature. In doing so, we endeavor to expand our duties in the purposeful, conscious and continuous development, creation and practice of all necessary human and interpersonal values. Nevertheless, we are certainly not ashamed of the knowledge and experience we have gained, and we also do not shy away from openly formulating and presenting these in public. Every human being should be guaranteed access to the truthful information of the teaching, so that they can either explore, process and utilize it, or reject it, be it for any reason, prejudice or obstacle.
Contradiction to cultic attitudes, clarity, the real value.
We are not secretive people who would enjoy playing any kind of mysterious games and concealing the truthful facts from our fellow human beings. As has already been explained, every human being, without exception, has the right to relevant information in all areas of life, and consequently we refrain from all forms of secrecy, from all forms of elitist posturing, and from the aberrant view that the truth is only for this or that chosen or elect or similar. It follows from this that we are also opposed to all forms of mysteries that cover up banal truths and banal connections with the guise of assumed mysteriousness in order to make themselves interesting. For these and other reasons, we endeavor to achieve the best possible clarity, vividness and precision in all our information, translations, texts and lectures, so that every human being who is interested can confront the clearly interpreted facts and deal with them in the form that is right for them.
Rejection of all outdated systems of belief and human stagnation.
As can be seen from the above and from various other texts on our website, our groups distance themselves completely from anything religious, sectarian, cultic, ecclesiastical, idolatrous, consciousness-slaving, supplicatory and ritualistic, as well as from anything that is in any wise connected with God Creator, with any gods, angels, karma, channeling, or with faith in general. Similarly, we also distance ourselves from the uncanny number of other insane and paradoxical schools of thought, spiritual teachings, esoteric teachings, ufological teachings, New Age movements, etc. These are all delusional and sect-related groups and organizations, etc., which are unfortunately springing up like poisonous mushrooms these days and often bring confusion, fantasies, dreams, pious wishes and illusions into many areas of life. This, instead of human beings finally being offered what is important, reality and its effective truth, the laws of nature, freedom of thought and feeling, development and realization in all directions, as well as effective knowledge. Of course, our groups do not deny that practically every false doctrine contains small splinters of truth and truthful connections that shine and thus lure ignorant and searching human beings into unreal nets. However, this does not change the fact that the actual concepts and starting points of such false teachings have no basis in reality and correspond to well thought out lies and the morbid fantasy or belief already mentioned. The information of the Freie Interessengemeinschaft für Grenz- und Geisteswissenschaften und Ufologiestudien FIGU, which is learned, utilized and taught and disseminated by the FIGU-Studien- und Landesgruppen without proselytizing, is unique in its value and origin and can therefore not be compared with any other direction or teaching existing on Earth.
Friendship and close cooperation with FIGU Switzerland.
The FIGU, Studien- und Landesgruppen, are characterized by the official cooperation with the Simja Silver Star Center in Switzerland, that is to say, with the core and the passive group of FIGU, as well as with various other official FIGU groups worldwide. We consider this official cooperation to be crucial in terms of creating a purposeful relationship with the free interest group and the FIGU materials, and thus with the spiritual teaching, as well as in terms of the understanding and correct dissemination of all relevant information. This also means, of course, that we make no distinction whatsoever between Billy Edward Albert Meier and the FIGU association he founded. In truth, there are no such differences, and therefore they do not exist, because the FIGU association was founded by Billy Edward Albert Meier and is still run and taught by him in the form of a regular core group membership, exactly as it should be and as it was intended from the very beginning. Our activity is therefore based on long-standing and personal interpersonal relationships with the FIGU community, the FIGU groups and the FIGU members, because only in this do we see the real effectiveness, the real approach, and the guarantee that all FIGU information is disseminated and presented logically, expediently, and unadulterated.
Promotion and mastery of the German language.
The FIGU-Studien- und Landesgruppen promote the study and mastery of the German language with all means at their disposal, because without this knowledge of the language, there is a dependence on the respective translators, on their understanding and interpretation of all original texts. This, however, makes it impossible to take an individual approach to the FIGU books and the FIGU writings, and also to choose them freely, as well as to really understand them and study them effectively. Added to this is the fact that some explanations and terms in German cannot be translated into other languages in the same way, which is why, despite the translator's best endeavors, a certain weakening of the original statements, as well as possible errors and inaccuracies, occur in these languages. The German language comes from the ancient language of Aryan, and in all its value, precision, and possibilities, it represents the most perfect language on this earth. Furthermore, in other languages, there is only a minimum of translated texts, because the means and possibilities of the various study and national groups are also minimal. The better one masters the German language, the better, faster, and more effectively one will be able to penetrate all the secrets and knowledge of the free interest group. The evolutionary code that Billy Edward Albert Meier has woven into all original German language spiritual teachings promotes and accelerates the evolution of consciousness, which will open up to human beings all the possibilities of real understanding, real utilization, and real practice of all the values and insights of the FIGU. This code is also effective when the book text is not fully understood due to lack of language skills, because it directly addresses certain areas of the subconscious.
Everyday reality, imperfection, mistakes, evolution, lifelong endeavor.
In conclusion, it is important to emphasize again and twice that all human beings in FIGU and in the FIGU study and FIGU Landesgruppen, as well as in all other FIGU groupings worldwide, are just human beings like everyone else. Human beings who make mistakes are imperfect and in no wise infallible. But we are human beings who strive to develop ourselves and to acquire progressive knowledge and wisdom in desirable directions, and who also try to recognize and correct our own mistakes and shortcomings, and to improve our internal and external circumstances where possible. We are not do-gooders who naively strive to change the world overnight, only to become upset and succumb to bitterness and skepticism when we realize that the change we long for has absolutely not happened. The only thing we therefore try to improve is ourselves, because it is only through our own lifelong improvement and relative perfection that we can begin to consider the improvement and relative perfection of any external circumstances, organizations, institutions, etc. However, this must never and cannot be allowed. However, this must never and can never take place through coercion, missionary work, persuasion and convincing, but only through one's own life, through one's own example, through one's own new behavior, and through one's own actions. It is only through this specific way that the members of the FIGU, Study and Landesgruppen endeavor to improve the human beings who willingly join in, and thus the world. We therefore call on all those responsible human beings to join us who are not indifferent to the development and further control of all internal and external social structures and aspects, and who have not yet succumbed to feelings of futility, apathy, indifference, and apathy. We call on them to participate with us in this lifelong process, and to work towards slowly but surely returning the situation around the world to a state in which destructive overpopulation no longer exists. A world in which no human being has to starve anymore, in which there is no more legal murder under the guise of justice and love through the death penalty. A world in which there is no more torture, no more torment, no more war, no more conquest, no more subjugation, no more rape and no more enslavement. A world in which no more political or religious sectarian leaders or powermongers lie to the people and exploit them in many wise and foul ways. A world in which all human beings have equal value and equal rights, and have the opportunity and sufficient space for a free and individual development of their consciousness, their thoughts and feelings, their actions and behavior, as well as the opportunity for a healthy life in an equally healthy and natural environment.
Ondřej Štěpánovský, Czech Republic.